Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of a new series which is going to be basically short day trip adventure. So here I am in the beautiful town of Waihi Beach, and today we're going to be going on a short sort of few hour return hike to Orokawa Bay, which is absolutely stunning. It's got kahuta over the beach. It looks absolutely brilliant. So let's see how we go. So first things, you're going to access this walk by basically going to Waihi Beach itself and then going to the northern end of the beach, and here you're going to find, you can head up this sort of path. So a couple things, Doc says you can't bring dogs here, so that's something to note, but this is a family friendly walk with a great beach at the end, although people say it's not really the best beach for swimming because it's quite steep. Here we go. Orakawa and Homunga tracks follow a very rugged coastline. You do have to be a bit careful, and then you'll see there the $10,000 fine if you bring a dog, so don't do that. Along this path apparently there are a couple Maori Pa sites, and these are basically, I would say ancient, but from the 1800s, fortified sites that the indigenous people of New Zealand used to basically protect themselves on, like their version of a castle really. And there were a lot of wars during the early 1800s in New Zealand, and a lot of these places were devastated. Apparently that's not signposted, but we're going to see if we can find it anyway. So today is actually not the best weather. It's actually really overcast, and it's actually been raining a bit even as I'm walking now. But sometimes those are honestly the best days to go, because normally this walk would be packed with people, but today there's pretty much no one. I've only passed a couple people. Of course we won't get quite those spectacular blue waters that you might otherwise see, but having not so many people here is definitely a bonus. At this point I have been trying to keep an eye out for these Pa sites. I mean, normally they're built up on a hill as it's a good defensive position, but the problem is, as you can see, it's quite thick bush, so any historical sites have probably overgrown, and as it's not signposted, it could be quite tough to find, but try my best, see what we can do. So as you can see where we are here, pretty fantastic views of the Pacific Ocean out in the distance. That's Mare Island. I haven't been able to find any Pa site as yet, but looking down the coastline, it gives you an idea of why this would be such a great defensive position, because back in the day, Māori, the main mode of transport, basically the only, was by waka, and they would come in basically big war canoes, and they would sail up the coast and raid other tribes. You have to remember, back in those times the bush was insanely thick in New Zealand, so it was difficult to make your way through that. So you can imagine from up here in a position like this, you can see all the way down the coast each way, you're going to get a fair bit of warning when someone's basically coming to invade. Well, here we are, just got down to the bottom and it's absolutely beautiful. No one else here, no one that I can see. Try and think Tom Hanks' Cast Away, although you're not allowed to light fires here. So you'll notice on this beach, Orokawa trees, native tree of New Zealand, that basically they're known for their red flowers. You'll always see them at New Zealand beaches. Look at that. White sand beach, all to myself. Now I probably don't have to go on about how great New Zealand is, but these are those kind of moments when you just go, wow, very lucky. It's a bit stormy today, but beautiful nonetheless. I wasn't able to find any Pa sites. My guess is that just due to the foliage that they're overgrown and hard to see. So perhaps I could look into that and try and come back in the future, because that would be cool. But just for a little bit of background information, during the early 1800s, 1810 to 1830, there was a series of wars in New Zealand which are now known as the Musket Wars. So basically what happened in the early 1800s, when Europeans came, they brought with them muskets. Now the Māori had always been a warring people, and when muskets showed up, you suddenly ended up with a big imbalance of power, as some tribes were able to trade for muskets when others weren't. So you ended up with some tribes, in particular the Ngāpuhi, who had hundreds and hundreds of muskets, and there was this huge imbalance of power, and they basically went on rampages, and people estimate as much as 10 to 20% of the Māori population was lost during the Musket Wars. And this area in particular, where I am, this was devastated during that time. Basically what would happen is they would come along the coast in their wakas and invade, and then basically force the people off their Pa sites, and they would have to basically go and relocate elsewhere. because up until the muskets came, of course, it was only hand-to-hand combat, but as soon as the muskets came, they could basically shoot straight through the defences of the Pas, which completely changed the history of New Zealand. So I've just noticed a path that actually leads up from the beach down here, so I'm going to head up there and see maybe if this might lead us to a path. I suppose it would sort of be natural to be down here by the beach, so let's find out. I'm not exactly sure where this goes, but it's not signposted, but it seems to go somewhere. It's been relatively well worn. So yeah, I don't know, I'm quietly optimistic that we might find something up here. It's certainly a bit steeper than the normal track. So I've been climbing for a few minutes. I've got relatively high. Should mention, in terms of these Pas and the fortifications, what we're looking for, they used to basically, top of a hill, there'd be grass steps leading up to it, and then generally they'd have walls made of wood. So, as you can imagine, it can be quite hard to see those grass steps now after years and years, and the bush is basically taken back over. Alright, so I've been going up this hill for about 15 minutes now. I think I've sort of reached the top and it's starting to head back down. So unfortunately nothing conclusive up here, so that's a shame, but you don't know unless you try. And I don't want to keep going down this path because it isn't signposted, and in New Zealand there are literally just tracks everywhere through the bush. I could end up miles and miles away. So let's head back down to the beach. Don't try this at home. Oh, wet and slippery. While I walk down the hill, an interesting piece of history. Honga Hiki, who was the leader of the Ngāpuhi tribe, one of the main instigators of the Musket Wars. An interesting story is that he went to see King George at one point to help basically put together a Māori dictionary. And while he was there, King George basically gave him a whole bunch of different, I don't want to say treasures, different gifts. And one of those was a suit of armour, among other things. But on his way home, he stopped in Sydney and he traded pretty much all of the gifts for muskets, for 300 muskets, which he then brought back to New Zealand. But the one thing he didn't trade was a suit of chainmail given to him by King George. And it was a good call, because in the end, the next war, he was shot twice during a battle, and the chainmail saved him both times. So sometimes it's best to not give all your gifts away. It's really getting quite windy now. I hope you can hear me, but this is quite interesting. I've just come along a bit further, and you can see there's quite an odd formation here, how it really just quite suddenly rises up in quite an even slope. And then along the top here, it seems unnaturally flat. Interesting. So what we would imagine is that there would have been basically a wooden wall of sticks that would have gone around the edge. But now that I'm down the bottom on the beach, I looked back up at what I thought previously might have been a Pa, and look at it from down here. You can clearly see two steps there. One lower and then one higher. Now I'm going to take a punt that that's an old Maori Pa site. It's just too uniform to be a natural formation. What a great spot for one. But it does surprise me because you don't really have that much warning of war canoes coming around the corner. Very interesting. It's hard to imagine sitting on this beautiful white sand beach right now that it was once the site of a bloody massacre. The Ngāpuhi tribe swept round the corner and basically wiped out all the inhabitants in front of them. But it was. Now today I didn't find conclusive evidence of the Maori Pa site, but I'm pretty confident that I have. But if you know something about it, please let me know in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. The purpose of the channel is all about adventure with a purpose. So the waves are crashing up in front of me here. I think it's basically time to go home. Tide's coming in. See you next time.